Ohio State went 5 for 5. That is a perfect quarterback passer rating in the spring portal window. This is a Thrower Thursday on the podcast daily. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. The deadline expired to put your name into the transfer portal, and the college football world was shocked and stunned, Bill, that Ohio State kept all 5 of those quarterbacks.
I'm a little shocked. I don't think I'm stunned. I'm not all the way stunned, but I'm a little shocked. I thought there would have been some movement here. Like it would have been logical had there been some, whether that was Lincoln Holtz wanting to go see if he could start somewhere else a little sooner, or Devin Brown, I guess, not wanting to risk being QB2 again with only 3 years of eligibility left. So and then also just like the climate that we're in, it's like surprising to see a team hold on to 5 scholarship quarterbacks in the transfer portal, but it's really good for Ohio State. Obviously, like it's a healthy quarterback room, and I think they would have had one either way. But to get out of this thing with all 5 quarterbacks, I think is tremendous for Ohio State, just because it gives them depth, it gives them competition. Maybe makes it a little bit more difficult to manage this summer, but I think I would rather have that than the alternative of feeling like you're a little light at the position.
Isn't it crazy that we're in a time and space when the idea that somebody still has the chance to be a 2-year starter, even if they don't start this year, is like, well, that's not enough time. It's time for me to leave. Like, when did that become normal?
Last year.
I don't like it. I'm against it.
I mean, I don't know. It feels like it's been. This clock has been sped up on quarterbacks for a long time. Like
it's because Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields and CJ Stroud were really, really great, and now all of a sudden everyone thinks they have to be out the door in 3 years, and that's just not normal life.
But I think around the country, when we're talking about this position specifically, it's not a new phenomenon that when there's only one guy that can play, that you've seen a ton of movement. I think there's been mixed success trending towards, like, some quarterbacks have moved on. Joe Burrow being the most famous example, both nationally and at Ohio State, and been a transfer quarterback and had a ton of success. Michael Penix just did that as well. Bo Nix did too. Caleb Williams did, I guess. So there are a lot of examples of very good quarterbacks transcending that and transferring and going on. But the next tier, that's not very common. If you're not proving, I think, even within the first couple of years that you are capable of starting, you are seeing a lot more movement, but you're not seeing those guys turn that into a ton of success. So the counter argument to that, I guess, would be then, Berm, that like guys that are patient and take multiple years to develop, which again would lump into this conversation Joe Burrow and Michael Penix, like maybe that is a better use of your time rather than jumping at the first available opportunity to move on.
Maybe. I'm looking at the NFL draft and the top 10 quarterbacks that were drafted in this year's NFL draft. Of those top 10, we have transfers from Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Spencer Rattler. Did Jordan Travis? He transferred into Florida State, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
6, and Joe Milton at number 7 of the top 10 quarterbacks picked in the draft this year transferred in college, which is insane to me.
So not new.
But I wonder how much of that is to do with the 2020 and 2021 anomaly that COVID caused, because these dudes are old, like it's an old group except for Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I don't know. That wasn't really the conversation I was prepared to have, to be honest with you.
See, the other thing that's weird though, because if you look at those 10 quarterbacks, the 3 that didn't transfer are Drake May, class of 2021, JJ McCarthy, class of 2021, and Michael Pratt. So
who should have transferred?
Who should have transferred to a better school, and so it's the youngest players in the draft are the ones that didn't transfer, except for Caleb Williams, which is just cuckoo.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
Is that a sales pitch to transfer or to not transfer?
I'm not really sure what to do with all that information.
I just think that we're in such a weird time that I don't know what's right or wrong, what's heads or tails, what's up, what's down. All I know is that we don't need to think to ourselves or project for Ohio State quarterbacks that if they're not the starter and a first-round pick as a third-year player, that their career is over. one way or the other, whether it's at Ohio State or somewhere else. Like, it doesn't mean that you aren't a good quarterback. It just means time is working differently for you. Time is a flat circle.
I mean, I think that's why Joe Burrow is the best perfect example, and why Ohio State and Ryan Day would make that point to, let's just assume for the sake of this conversation that Will Howard takes the first snap in the spring game and is like got the lead. We assume that he's going to be the starter. We don't know what exactly those conversations entail, but let's say that that's what the conversation they had. If you're Ryan Day or Chip Kelly or Ohio State writ large, you'd be like, well, Joe Burrow gave 3 years. He got a degree here and then was able to parlay that success when he wasn't going to be the starter because of Dwayne Haskins. Found another place. He was mature. He was physically developed. He understood what it took to play. And then he won a Heisman elsewhere and was the number one pick. But he's still very proud of his Ohio State degree. You could do that too, Devin Brown or Lincoln Holtz. I don't know that has to be the conversation immediately for Julian Saiyan or Aaron Nolan, but that to me is the best of all worlds. If you are, when that applies specifically to Lincoln Holtz, if he is the person that some people are most surprised. We know of other Big Ten schools that certainly wanted Lincoln Holtz to be in the transfer portal and move on. What is the better use of his time? To go somewhere else where he hasn't spent a year learning the offense, missed spring practice, let's say hypothetically at Iowa or Wisconsin. Is he in position to start there in the fall? I would say that's pretty unlikely that he's able to achieve that. What's the better use of your time? Another continuing to develop and compete against Devin Brown and Will Howard and work in Mickey Marotti's strength program and learn from Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, or go start completely over after 1 year. I think that was well on Lincoln Holtz's mind in his decision at this point going into May and when the portal closed. There's nothing that precludes him from still being a starter at one of those places down the road if that's what he really wants to do, if he can't be the starting quarterback at Ohio State, which I don't think anyone is telling him that he can't do down the road, just that it's probably unlikely he's going to do it in 2024.
Bill, pop quiz. Mm-hmm. Who is Iowa's quarterbacks coach?
Their quarterbacks coach?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. It's Tim Lester's their OC, but I don't think he's their quarterbacks coach.
Right. He's their new offensive coordinator. His name is Keno Keefer. But my question is, if you were a quarterback entering your second year of college football and you were looking at the second year as strictly an educational venture, would you rather learn from Chip Kelly and Ryan Day or Keno Keefer and Tim Lester?
Let me think about that for a second. I think I'll choose Ryan Day and Chip Kelly.
Who the hell is Keno Keefer?
Keno Keefer is made up.
Is that a real name?
Yeah, so it does make sense for Lincoln Holtz. And I think the comparison to Burrow, especially because the Devin Brown thing to me, I mean, that's on the same timeline. Joe Burrow transferred at the start of his fourth year after he graduated from Ohio State, played 2 years at LSU. And, obviously his first year was not like lights out. So I think that it was expected that people would transfer this offseason or in the spring just because, that's just what they're supposed to do. And I don't know that if you recruit players that don't have, I don't want to say a quitter's mentality because Joe Burrow certainly does not. And his situation was unique because Dwayne Haskins presumably had 2 years left and all of the other things that occurred, and the broken hand and the fact that Joe then, it's just a weird situation. But it was like people were pushing them into the portal and none of them really seemed like they ever thought about it.
You guys want some Keno Keefer information?
No, not really.
Give me all your Keno Keefer talk.
Former head coach at Allegheny in Western Pennsylvania. Won a national championship there in 1990. He's a former receiver at John Carroll University. He is 70 years old and has been Iowa's quarterbacks coach since 2017.
Well, he's done some fantastic work with those quarterbacks.
Yeah. I like the cut of Kirk Francis jib. I really do. Just, you know what, dude?
Just cash those checks.
Iowa's quarterback play has been chef's kiss for 7 years, and that dude should just stay there forever.
Yeah, he's got the best in the game. I think everybody knows that Kenny O is getting the job done.
That's right. KOK does it better than anybody. I do, you guys are right about everything you're saying about what's a better opportunity to go play for Keno Keefer to be Ohio State's backup quarterback. Especially when you're like so young in your career, like Lincoln Keenholz is. Doug and I talked about that on Kings of Columbus a little bit. Like Lincoln Keenholz is on like a unique path here as like a guy who didn't play football year round, didn't have spring ball at Ohio State. As an earlier old freshman, played in South Dakota, which frankly doesn't have the best high school football in the world. Like there's a learning curve there that he has to overcome, I think, before he's ready to start. And it seems like he's on the path. I don't think he's ready for that quite yet. So he's probably better off just like still learning at a place like Ohio State. But I guess to play devil's advocate to that, like 5 quarterbacks is a lot. Are you certain you're going to get the work you need to develop at Ohio State when like you got to get Will Howard ready to start? And there's a competition between Will Howard and Devin Brown, and then there are 3 other mouths to feed beyond that. Like that also I think is a reasonable question. Like how much work can you actually get as you try to progress to being good enough to be a starting quarterback?
Well, you brought that up right away, Bill. Like that's the most interesting part of this dynamic for when we put this conversation solely under the lens of 2024. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have to get one of those 5 ready to win a national championship. And, Urban Meyer brought this up during the spring game telecast. I mentioned it in, the review that we did afterwards, a couple days after on the podcast daily. And he's talking about the difficulty and trying to understand the way Ohio State is managing the reps, the way it did that throughout spring. We saw that with the rotation, Chip Kelly and Ryan Day rolling all of them through. And some days that meant Will Howard was going to get some reps behind the threes or with the true freshman. And some days that was going to be Devin Brown. It was like, spinning the roulette wheel out there with who you're going to be throwing to. That can't continue to happen in training camp, in my opinion. And I am not Chip Kelly or Ryan Day, so it doesn't matter what I think. But you can't worry, I think, in August about feeding all 5 mouths. That's not going to happen. I think Julian Saiyan and Aaron Noland have to be aware that that's going to be the situation for them, because one guy has to be the leader at the top. And if that's Will Howard or Devin Brown, doesn't matter. Whoever they choose to roll with has to get the most amount of reps, and then you go from there. I think that is challenging with 5 because you also want to do things for the future. Ohio State's program is going to continue beyond 2024. But if all the chips are in the middle here to win a national title, the rest of that stuff, I don't think you can worry about it at all. Like Aaron Nolan and Julian Saiyan are like, they've made their decision to stick around. They're going to play with the scout team, but the rest of that stuff like has to go by the wayside.
Yeah, I think you can do it for the first couple of weeks of camp, maybe, but like certainly not in the season, and certainly not at maybe like the midway point when you're getting ready to play a game. You have to curtail what everybody's getting. But I also think you use the summer, and then you use those first couple of weeks of camp to like, I don't know, make sure that Julian Sayan's not QB3, right? Or even QB2, because I think that's still possible.
Yeah, but QB3 can be your scout team quarterback. I'm thinking about it from a Lincoln Keenholz perspective here. This is a kid who the areas where he has to develop are physically and understanding college football and the speed of the game. If he's the scout team quarterback all season long, and he gets to continue to add weight and be in the weight room and learn how to read defenses by playing against Ohio State's defense all year as the guy against them, like maybe that's better to me than going to be in the backup at Iowa. Like that's significantly better. Because if Julian Saiyan was QB3 or whoever ends up being QB3, like if the other guy's running the scout team, like you're playing against one of the 2 best defenses in the country day in and day out. Like I think that's actually a major plus for that guy. And another reason why go somewhere else and play against crap when you can play here and actually, get better, even if you're not playing on Saturday.
It feels like this entire conversation has been centered on Lincoln Keenholz, just because we know that it seems like other programs thought they could entice him based on the situation in the depth chart at Ohio State and get him into a different situation moving forward. But what does it mean to either of you guys? I guess, Berm, I already know what you feel about this, but what does it say about the quarterback position and Devin Brown specifically that he decided to stick around post-spring?
I mean, I've said this before, like talking off camera, but I firmly believe, 100% believe there's going to be a moment in the 2024 season where Devin Brown, whether if Will Howard is the starter, and I think we all still agree that he will be the guy most likely to lead Ohio State onto the field as the starter in week 1, unless something significantly changes in the fall. I am confident Devin Brown is going to win Ohio State a football game or two. And if he decides to leave after this season or to put himself in a position to be the starter next year, I think that he will cement a legacy at Ohio State that will be, people will look back on Devin Brown no matter what, for all of the things he's already persevered through, and just give major props and love the kid. And I think he deserves it. Like, it is so rare. And again, it shouldn't be rare. Like, I hate that this is college football now, but it is college football now. So you have to give a kid like this credit and say, dude, like, we completely have underestimated or maybe scoffed at this notion that, like, you know, burn the boats, throw all the cards in the, go all in, pot committed, whatever you stupid cliche you want to use. Like,
you're such a good gambler. It's amazing.
He's proving it over and over and over. And I think that people should really be celebrating Devin Brown as a Buckeye.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also, I would hope that Devin doesn't feel like he painted himself into a corner either, right? Like,
no, I don't
situation, and I don't think he does either. And like, I think it's reasonable for him to stay this year because he has 3 years of eligibility left. Even if he doesn't beat out Will Howard for the job, he's a shoestring away from playing meaningful snaps for Ohio State, to Berm's point. And then he's positioned to be the starter for 2 more years beyond that if he wants to give it another go at winning this job. So like, that all makes sense to me. It all just feels.
And if he doesn't, sorry to interrupt, Will, he's going to be a college graduate who can go play somewhere else with 2 years and go wherever he wants. And
there wasn't teams are quarterback hungry across college football, but there, in my opinion, there weren't very many enticing situations out there. If I'm a guy who thinks I'm like a Power 4 starter, where would you have gone? Like, I don't even know what would have been a good opportunity for him. But it all feels, I don't say this to, I'm not criticizing the decisions to stay whatsoever. I'm just trying to like put myself in their shoes and like think about how I would view it. It all does feel a little bit risky to me because of Julian Saiyan's presence on the roster. Like, if Ohio State goes into the Akron game and Julian Saiyan is the backup quarterback, like, I'm not going to be surprised by that. He has the highest ceiling of anybody in the room, including Will Howard. So like, that's a risk for a guy like Devin Brown and a guy like Lincoln Holtz to like come back, bet on yourself, try to be QB2, try to be QB3, and then all of a sudden this freshman passes you up. Because like, I do think that's on the table, some percentage.
I don't know. We'll see. They all want to compete, which I think is the important part. And I'm trying to think if there's any other school that could have actually done this. Why there feels like there's so much surprise about it. A, because of the changes in college football, but B, like, what other school could hope to offer the same things to the quarterbacks that Ohio State can right now, both in terms of they're talking about getting through a season, 16, 17 games, playing depth, developing, learning from Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, and then competing for a national championship. I think maybe even in a year's time, there's no way that we could have this conversation. Like, Ohio State might not be in the same spot to offer or accommodate all 5 quarterbacks next year, or wouldn't have been maybe a year ago that they are right now. This might become an exception for the Buckeyes as well. But to your point, Bill, like, there's no more enticing situation for where all these guys are specific in their career right now and where Ohio State is as a program. And maybe we shouldn't think that this is going to become a normal thing for them, but it might be. Mm-hmm. But it seems like everything is just lined up for a one-time circumstance, and that next spring will be a lot more disruptive potentially than this one proved to be.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Look at the last 5 years of Ryan Day's quarterback room. Like, it's never been staying together. Well, we have 4 guys. Oh, crap. Now we have 2. Crap. We got 5. Yeah. Now we have 1. Like, it's been that way. This does feel a little, unusual.
And I would have thought, and did say going into camp in March, like, I don't think there's any way that you can end April 13th. You can't keep 5. And I thought at that time, especially, that they're going to need to pick one. That's the best interest of all those guys, because they're going to have decisions to make in NIL and playing time opportunities elsewhere. And that, I think I was certainly wrong about the decisions that were made and the outcome for where Ohio State is right now. But I waffled midway through after we did a bunch of Buck Nines and got to know Will Howard and Devin Brown and Lincoln Holtz just a little bit better. It seemed like I had a better understanding even by the middle of March of where they viewed their own careers, what they wanted, what they thought was reasonable to expect from themselves and from the program in 2024. And it was like, I think I said that maybe around Student Appreciation Day or before that. It's like, Bill and I had that conversation. Like, I'm starting to think that all 5 are going to stay. And I waffled a little bit at the end and went back and forth, because it's just what Berm talked about early on. It's hard in this era of college football to actually think that that's going to happen, because you don't know what other things are going on behind the scene. But like, it felt like there was that buy-in that was well before April 13th, and certainly before April 30th, that Ohio State, the players themselves were confident that this was the right thing for them, which is obviously the most important part.
Yeah, you never got like even a whiff of like, this guy is unhappy with his standing, or this guy feels like he's not being treated the right way, or this guy felt like he was misled about what this situation is. And I think Ryan Day's been really good about that. Even like going back to when he was first hired as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, like there's a line of communication and a constant dialogue there that I think keeps guys like firmly aware of their situation. And that doesn't guarantee you anything, as Berm said. Like, we've seen this quarterback room blow up before, but it gives you the best shot. And I think as long as Ohio State maintains that, and I believe they will, they have probably a better chance than anyone else in college football of navigating stuff like this. But it's not going to happen every year. This is probably maybe even a once in a, I don't know, 5 or 10 year kind of circumstance to keep this many quarterbacks in the current climate. But I think it is, like, in a roundabout way, like a pretty strong endorsement of just like the culture of the Ohio State quarterback room.
Can we talk about something that's not quarterback related?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's throwing Thursday, so I don't know.
Okay, well, here, I'm throwing this idea out there. At the way that the spring transfer portal window worked, with the timing of it compared with Ohio State's spring practice ending like 2 full weeks before, like ending right before the portal open, I am of the mindset that it makes a ton of sense for Ohio State moving forward to push spring practice back 2 weeks and make sure the portal ends like it did for Oregon with their spring game this weekend. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
I think I would disagree, and not just for the sake of argument. I think it worked to Ohio State's advantage that they had a complete body of work of 15 practices, a week after, for them to have position and coordinator and strength coach meetings with them to lay out all the in a way that you probably don't have time for individual one-on-one meetings during spring camp itself. I thought that week after, that buffer was important. Some guys, obviously, Dallin Hayden had already made up his decision the week before. You saw that with Cedric Hawkins going in immediately. Some of those things you're not going to be able to address or massage or, talk through. I certainly understand that part, but I think that timing for Ohio State worked out about perfectly. Even if guys are wanting to leave, I mean, Hawkins went out there and made 5 tackles in the spring game. They got to give him an opportunity to get some reps and show off and maybe find a new home that he didn't have last fall. I think even for the players that were leaving, that worked out okay. So I think you give them all the reps, the honest feedback. You're not, if I know you don't mean it this way, Berm, but like, if you push it back, it feels like you're trying to trap and trick people into staying. And I don't think
I can see that argument. My thought is that what ends up happening is you have 2 weeks, you have a week full of meetings and everyone tells you they're staying. And then you have a week where everyone goes home and minds change. And then they don't announce it until the day of the portal closing, and you lose the ability to replace them. And that, I think, is where I would be concerned in the future, because like Ohio State obviously got through this transfer window pretty unscathed, losing 6 guys, but even Keon Grays and Enoch Vamahi and Nigel Glover all on the last day, like as of 3 days prior, all those dudes had told their position coaches that they were sticking around. And so Ohio State doesn't get aggressive going after anyone in the portal. And now you're looking at, again, adding more walk-ons for bodies just so you have.
But they still can do that if there are players in the portal. Like, it's a deadline to enter it. It is not a deadline for a decision for where you're going.
Nobody that you would want to try to get into the portal. You know what I mean? You don't have time to do that.
Well, they had.
Well, I don't know that you're doing that for depth either. Like, if you're in a position where you feel like you need to do that, then you shouldn't be waiting around for guys to tell you what they're doing.
I think that would be the other benefit from the coaching perspective is to finish up on April 13th, 2 days before the portal closes. So you also know exactly what you think you might need when the players go in there officially. You're already done. You're not trying to evaluate practice and maybe in 2 weeks this guy could look a little bit better or get there. Like that, they were done. Like all evaluations were done for the players and for the coaches. And like if they had got through that and be like, oh, you know what? We are more concerned about right guard, right tackle. This has to be done. They didn't need it. I think they would have been fine on that.
I thought we lost you. I can understand the argument. I think it's an interesting conversation that Ohio State will try to figure out in the future if there's a better way, because I agree that like having the week where you can talk to everyone and have your meetings and then send everyone home, like I like that, but I do know from just conversations around the building in the last 24 hours that there were people who were like, what in the hell? That didn't go the way we thought.
I wouldn't want to be in a position though where like you're losing 15 guys from your roster in the last week of spring practice either. Like Colorado had like 2 running backs for its spring game, and one of them was a guy they just moved over from defense so they could have more than one.
Yeah,
it's better for everybody to complete spring camp.
Well, then there should be a standard spring camp time for everyone in college football.
I do agree with that.
Well,
that makes more sense to me. Have everybody finish before the portal opens.
Good luck getting everyone on the same page, because you can't even have the same situation with semesters and quarters across the country. It does turn out that it's a pretty unwieldy sport to manage across 130 programs or more, or whatever it is now. I don't even know who's in this level until the Super League starts.
In total, from the end of the football season to now, Ohio State lost 25 players to the transfer portal. Is that right? That's what I'm looking at on 247. That's what it shows. 25 players out.
Yeah. I mean, the winter period was bustling. Didn't it wind up being, well, maybe 25 is too high. I don't think it was 19, was it?
Keon Grace, Nigel Glover, Enoch Vamahi, Jihad Carter, Cedric Hawkins, Dallin Hayden, Sam Hart, Noah Rogers, Jesse Mirko, Jaden McKenzie, Will Hartson, that one's a walk-on, doesn't count, Joe Royer, Chip Trainum, Jair Brown, Omari Abor, Julian Fleming, Reed Carrico, Jacob James, Evan Pryor, Cam Martinez, Kai Stokes, Kyle McCord, Ryan Turner, Parker Lewis, Vic Cutler. So how many? I mean, that's a lot of players. It's actually funny because we've talked about like, we talked about that on Wednesday morning show, but like when you actually just look at it, like you realize that's like a third of the freaking roster.
But 0 quarterbacks.
Yeah, and like very little in the way of guys who are going to do things this year. And then they added 6 guys who are going to be a huge part of the team. So like it's still a net positive in my mind.
Yeah, that's the
very much so.
I guess I'm wrong. I didn't even count that as the window, but they did lose a quarterback in the winter portal. One who started a lot of games for them. But 0 in the spring window, which is where I guess Kyle McCord has been gone for so long that doesn't even register as part of the depth chart to me.
Yeah, and I'm confident Ohio State would 100 times out of 100 trade those 20 for those 6 that they got coming in. So worked out okay.
Feels like a pretty good deal for them.
Would they trade all 20 for Caleb Downs?
Yes. Yes, they would.
Well, they had to save some ammunition for Quinshot Judkins, but I think it turned out okay. Anyway, the portal is closed, and Ohio State has retained its all 5 quarterbacks who were in spring camp after losing one in December. So that feels like a win for the Buckeyes. We'll see what that means in a couple months when they get back to work on the practice field. So we'll fill a lot of time before then. May is going to be a long, difficult month of off-season talk, folks. Just buckle up. We're going to do the best we can to get through it on the podcast daily every week. So we appreciate you coming along for the ride. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This has been the podcast daily for Thursday. We'll see you.